I stood at the entrance of the Grand Hotel ballroom, the gold-framed doors wide open, letting out a warm glow of chandeliers and the hum of laughter. I'd rehearsed this moment in my head 1,000 times, walking in, seeing her in her dress, maybe even holding back tears as I watched her step into a new life. Instead, before I could take a single step forward, my daughter appeared. Her white gown trailed behind her like a cloud, her hair perfectly pinned with pearls. She looked stunning. My little girl, all grown up, but her eyes were hard, cold. "Dad," she said, barely above a whisper, yet somehow loud enough to slice through every sound in that hallway. "You're not invited. Go away." The air left my lungs. I thought she was joking. I even let out a little laugh. But she didn't smile. She just crossed her arms, blocking the doorway like I was some uninvited stranger. I could see guests turning their heads, watching. My ex-wife, standing a few feet behind, smirking like this was exactly the scene she wanted. And my daughter, my own daughter, wouldn't meet my eyes anymore. In that moment, I didn't know whether to walk away, shout, or demand an explanation. But one thing was certain. Something far deeper was going on than a simple wedding snub. If you're enjoying this so far, don't forget to subscribe, tap that like button, and comment below where you're listening from. I'd love to know. By the way, my name's Michael Torres. I'm 54 years old, a self-employed carpenter from San Diego. This happened just 3 months ago, the day my daughter's wedding turned into the most humiliating, gut-wrenching, and ultimately life-changing event of my life. I stayed rooted to the spot, my hands still on the edge of the doorframe, as if letting go meant accepting what she'd just said. "Emily, what are you talking about? I'm your father. Of course I'm invited." My voice cracked on the word father, like it suddenly didn't mean anything anymore. She shook her head. "Not today. Not here." She glanced over her shoulder, not toward my ex-wife this time, but toward a tall man in a black suit I didn't recognize. He gave the smallest nod, and Emily stepped back, as though his approval meant more than my presence. The man whispered something to the wedding planner, who quickly hurried toward me. She had the kind of overly polite smile that hides knives. "Sir, I'm going to have to ask you to leave," she said softly, as though this was a simple seating mix-up. "This is a private event, and your name is not on the guest list." Not on the guest list. The words rang in my ears. I'd paid for her college. I'd driven across the state to fix her first apartment's leaky pipes. I'd sat up with her through nights of heartbreak, promising her that no man, no friend, no force on earth would ever take me away from her. And now, my name wasn't even on the guest list. I looked past the planner, my eyes locking on Emily's again. There was a flicker there, guilt, maybe, or shame, but she turned away before I could be sure. Something was wrong, very wrong, and I wasn't leaving without finding out what. The wedding planner tried to gently guide me away from the entrance, but I planted my feet. Years of hauling lumber and swinging hammers had made me stubborn in more ways than one. "I'm not going anywhere until my daughter tells me why," I said, keeping my voice low but firm. Emily didn't answer. She kept talking to her bridesmaids, laughing, too loudly, too perfectly, like she was in a commercial for happiness. But I could see the tremor in her hands. My ex-wife, Linda, finally stepped forward. She was wearing a dress that probably cost more than my truck, her hair done in that high-maintenance way that made her look like she'd stepped out of a lifestyle magazine. "Michael," she said, drawing out my name like it was something sour. "You weren't invited because you don't belong here anymore." Emily made her choice. Histoire de her. Emily made her choice? Or you made it for her? Her smile didn't falter, but I caught the flash of annoyance in her eyes. "If you want to cause a scene, that's your business. But not today. Not at her wedding." The muscles in my jaw clenched. "If you think I'm just going to walk away, you've forgotten who I am." She leaned closer, lowering her voice so only I could hear. "You're a guest in her life now, Michael. And like any guest, you can be uninvited." It felt like she just slammed a door in my face without touching it. And the worst part? Emily still wouldn't look at me. I stepped back from Linda, but only to get a better view of the room inside. From the doorway, I could see tables lined with champagne flutes, a towering wedding cake in the corner, and rows of guests. many of whom I recognized from years past. But as my eyes scanned the crowd, I noticed something strange. Several faces I didn't recognize were clustered together, whispering and occasionally glancing toward me. Not family, not friends from Emily's childhood. They looked strategic. And then I spotted him, the tall man in the black suit from earlier. He wasn't mingling or smiling like the other guests. He was watching me. Not in the way a stranger might curiously glance at someone, but like a bouncer sizing up trouble. I took a step forward, testing the waters, and sure enough, he shifted subtly in my direction. He wasn't just here for the wedding. He was here for me. My mind raced. Why would my daughter hire someone to keep me out? Why would she risk humiliating me like this in front of everyone we know? Unless it wasn't her idea at all. I looked back at Linda, and she gave me a sweet, satisfied smile. The kind you give when you know you've won a game your opponent doesn't even realize they're playing. Something about this whole situation stank, and I wasn't going to let it slide. I stepped away from the doorway before someone decided to physically remove me. My heart was pounding, but not from embarrassment anymore, from the sharp, hot anger building in my chest. For months, I'd been waiting for this day. I'd even bought a new suit, one Emily had helped me pick out over FaceTime just 2 months ago. She'd laughed when I tried on the tie, telling me it made me look distinguished. That wasn't the voice of a daughter planning to exile her dad from her wedding. So when did things change? And why hadn't I seen it coming? I pulled my phone out and scrolled through her messages. The last one from her was just a week ago. Can't wait to see you walk me down the aisle, Dad Redheart. My grip tightened on the phone. This wasn't a misunderstanding. This was betrayal. I turned my gaze back toward the ballroom doors. The music had started, soft piano, probably the processional, and I imagined her walking without me, her arm looped through. Her stepfather, maybe. The man Linda married just 2 years after our divorce. A guy who'd never been around for scraped knees or late-night fevers. I felt my throat close up. I wasn't just losing a moment. I was losing my place in her life. And someone wanted it that way. I moved farther down the hallway, away from the direct view of the ballroom doors, and leaned against the wall. I needed space to think, to breathe. My pulse was still thudding in my ears, but beneath the anger, there was this small, stubborn ember of hope that refused to die. Something about Emily's face when she told me to leave, the tightness around her eyes, the way she couldn't hold my gaze, told me she wasn't entirely in control of this. She'd always been a terrible liar, ever since she was a kid. I used to joke that her tell was so obvious she could never work in poker. I started replaying the last few months in my mind like a crime scene investigator. Our calls had gotten shorter, sure, but she'd blamed it on wedding stress. She'd mentioned Linda getting more involved in the planning, but nothing that suggested this. Then there was the money. I'd quietly sent Emily a check to help with expenses. Not huge, but enough to cover a chunk of the catering bill. She texted me a thank you with 3 heart emojis. That wasn't the behavior of someone planning to humiliate me, unless she'd been pressured, or worse, threatened. I glanced toward the tall man in the black suit again. He was gone from the doorway now, but I spotted him near the far wall, his eyes still sweeping the room. He didn't move like regular security. His gaze wasn't on the guest's safety. It was on control. If Emily was being manipulated, then leaving quietly wasn't just cowardice. It was abandoning her when she might need me most. I straightened my jacket and adjusted my tie. I wasn't ready to crash the wedding. Not yet. But I also wasn't about to slink off like some unwelcome stranger. Somewhere in that room was the truth. And if I played this carefully, I might still get to walk my daughter down the aisle. Even if it meant walking right through the people trying to erase me. I decided my best move wasn't to storm in, but to circle around. Big weddings have back hallways, service corridors, kitchens, staff entrances. I'd done enough carpentry work in hotels over the years to know how they were laid out. I headed down the side hall, past a sign that said authorized personnel only. Nobody stopped me, probably because I walked like I belonged there. That's a trick you learn in life. Confidence is the best disguise. As I slipped through a side door, I found myself in the catering prep area. Waiters in white shirts and black vests moved in a well-rehearsed dance, stacking trays of hors d'oeuvres and filling champagne glasses. The air was thick with the smell of roast chicken and garlic butter. One young waiter nearly bumped into me. "Sir, guests aren't." I cut him off with a friendly smile. "Bride's father. Just try and find a coordinator." The kid nodded and moved on, no questions asked. From here, I could hear the music more clearly. The piano had faded into a string quartet now. That meant the ceremony was either about to start or already underway. I peeked through a crack in the double doors leading to the ballroom. There she was, Emily, standing at the far end of the aisle. And sure enough, it wasn't me beside her. It was Greg, her stepfather. His hand rested smugly over hers, his chin tilted up like he'd earned the right to be there. I could almost hear Linda's voice coaching him. "Chin high, shoulders back, you're the father figure now." I bit my tongue, so hard it hurt. That was supposed to be my place, my walk, my moment. And now I was watching it through a sliver of wood, like some outsider peeking at someone else's life. But as my eyes drifted to Emily's face, I saw something that kept me from storming in right then. She wasn't smiling. Not really. She was doing the kind of smile you wear when someone tells you to for the camera. All teeth, no warmth. And in her left hand, hidden from Greg's view, she was clutching something tightly. I couldn't see what it was, but the grip looked desperate. That wasn't the face of a bride having the happiest day of her life. Something was off. Very off. I leaned closer to the door crack, trying to get a better look at whatever Emily was holding, but the usher standing nearby shifted, blocking my view. My chance was gone. The quartet swelled into a softer, more deliberate melody, the kind played when the bride takes her first steps. Greg led her forward, and guests rose from their seats in unison. The sight made my chest ache. Every step they took down that aisle felt like sand slipping through an hourglass I couldn't flip over. This was supposed to be me. This was supposed to be the moment she held onto my arm, feeling the steady heartbeat she'd known since she was born. Instead, she had his. My phone buzzed suddenly, snapping me out of it. I glanced down. A message. From Emily. "Don't cause trouble. Please." Just 6 words. No punctuation, no emoji, nothing to soften it. And yet, I could almost hear the fear in it. I typed back quickly, "What's going on?" The 3 dots appeared for a second, then disappeared. No reply. I waited, staring at the screen, but nothing else came through. Meanwhile, the officiant began speaking, his voice echoing across the ballroom. I couldn't hear every word from where I stood, but I caught enough, the usual talk of love, commitment, and forever. I wanted to push through those doors, demand an answer, but every instinct told me that charging in now would only make things worse. Not just for me, for her. If Emily was in trouble, the last thing she needed was a scene that would turn the entire room against me. So I stepped back into the shadows of the service corridor, my mind racing. I didn't have a plan yet, but I knew this. I wasn't leaving. Not until I understood why my daughter, my own flesh and blood, felt the need to send me away from her wedding. And I had the sinking feeling that Linda wasn't the only one pulling strings here. I stayed in the dim corridor, the muffled sounds of the ceremony echoing through the walls. The more I thought about Emily's text, the more determined I became. Don't cause trouble. Please. That wasn't the plea of someone angry at me. That was the plea of someone trapped. I've been a father long enough to know the difference. Emily wasn't pushing me away because she wanted to. She was pushing me away because she felt she had to. And if she felt that way on her wedding day, it meant something, or someone, was making her feel unsafe. I wasn't about to let that stand. I started pacing the narrow hallway, my work boots. Yes, I'd worn them with my suit. Old habit, thudding against the carpet. The old carpenter in me knew one thing. You don't tear down a wall until you know what's behind it. And right now, I needed the blueprint of this mess. First step, figure out who the tall guy in the suit really was. I backtracked toward the catering area, hoping to find a vantage point where I could spot him again. Sure enough, he was stationed near the far entrance of the ballroom, arms crossed, eyes scanning like a hawk. His posture screamed security, but his focus was far too personal. I flagged down a passing waiter. "Hey, you know who that guy is?" "The one in the black suit by the side door." The waiter glanced over, then shrugged. "Not hotel staff. Came in with the mother of the bride." Haven't seen him smile once. That told me a lot. Linda had brought him. And if he wasn't hotel security, then he was here for one reason only, to keep me away. Which meant Linda wasn't just happy to see me excluded, she'd planned it. I felt the knot in my stomach harden. All right, Linda, you want a game? Let's play. I kept my eyes on a man in the black suit, watching his movements, the way he occasionally touched the earpiece hidden under his hair. He wasn't just muscle. He was listening to someone. I followed his gaze, and it didn't take long to see who he kept checking in with. Linda. She was sitting in the second row, angled just enough to catch sight of both the aisle and me, or at least where she thought I'd be if I tried to get in. Her expression was composed, but her lips moved slightly every few minutes, like she was speaking into a mic pinned under her corsage. It hit me like a hammer blow. She wasn't just keeping me out for spite. She was controlling the entire flow of the day, and that included Emily. Memories started snapping together in my head like puzzle pieces. Emily's sudden reluctance to talk in the last month. The mysterious, "we're changing the seating chart" message Linda sent in the family group text. One that conveniently excluded me from the loop. The way Emily's fiancé, Daniel, had seemed distant the last time I saw him, almost guarded. Linda had always been manipulative, but this was different. This was surgical. She wasn't just erasing me from the wedding. She was rewriting the story so that my role in Emily's life looked like a footnote. I remembered something Emily told me when she was 16, after a fight with her mom. Dad, she always find a way to make her version sound like the truth. And now Linda was doing it on the biggest day of Emily's life. My chest tightened. Not just from anger, but from the realization that Emily might be going along with it because she thought it would protect me, or Daniel, or herself. One thing was clear. If I wanted to get to Emily and find out the truth, I couldn't go through the front door. I'd have to outsmart both Linda and her hired guard dog. And I just thought of a way to do it. The idea hit me while I was still watching the staff hustle in and out of the catering area. If Linda had eyes on all the main entrances, then I need to come in like a ghost, through a path nobody was guarding because they didn't think anyone would use it. I scanned the kitchen, and there it was, a swinging metal door at the far end, marked service hall delivery access. Those hallways were usually narrow, lined with storage closets and utility rooms, but I knew from past hotel jobs that they often connected directly to the staging area behind the head table. If I could get there during the reception, I could be right behind Emily, without anyone knowing until I was ready. I started toward the door, but stopped when I heard a burst of applause from the ballroom. The ceremony must have just ended, which meant Emily was now officially married, and whatever pressure she was under, it wasn't going away. The applause turned into music again, livelier now, and I knew the reception was starting. That was my chance. I pushed through the service hall door. The space beyond was dim, the hum of industrial fridges blending with the faint buzz of fluorescent lights. I walked fast, counting turns until I found a narrow door with a laminated sign. Event staff, do not enter. Perfect. I eased it open just a crack. The smell of champagne and roasted meat wafted in, along with the sound of silverware clinking. I could see the back of the head table, white linens, tall floral arrangements, and there she was, Emily. She was smiling for the cameras, but the smile vanished the moment the photographer turned away. She glanced left and right, then down at the tablecloth, her fingers drumming nervously. If I didn't know better, I'd say she was waiting for someone. And maybe, just maybe, that someone was me. I stayed in the shadow of the doorway, my heart pounding so hard I could feel it in my ears. From where I stood, I could see almost everything. The guests mingling, Linda playing hostess with that polished smile, the man in the black suit scanning the room like a human radar, and Emily. She looked like a statue carved out of worry. Every time Daniel leaned over to whisper something to her, she nodded politely, but her eyes kept darting toward the entrance. I wanted to rush in, pull her aside, demand to know what was going on. But the moment I stepped out, black suit guy would be on me, and Linda would make sure I was escorted out before I got within 5 feet of my daughter. I needed a distraction, something loud, chaotic, and impossible to ignore. My brain raced through options. Fire alarm? Too extreme. Spill a tray of drinks? Might just make me look like a drunk idiot. But then I spotted an opportunity. One of the catering carts, loaded with champagne flutes and rolling toward the dance floor. The young waiter pushing it was moving slow, carefully weaving through guests. If that cart just happened to tip over, all eyes would be on the crash. And for 30 precious seconds, no one would be watching the back of the head table. It wasn't elegant, and it wasn't subtle. But I was out of options. I slipped back into the service hall and circled until I found the other side of the catering path. Timing would be everything. I waited until the waiter was just a few feet from a cluster of guests, the kind that would all shriek at once, and then I stepped out like I'd just gotten lost. I accidentally clipped the edge of the cart with my hip. The champagne tower wobbled, then cascaded in a glittering, bubbly disaster across the polished floor. Guests gasped. A few even laughed nervously. Linda's head whipped toward the sound. Black suit guy moved instantly toward the commotion. Perfect. I slipped through the gap and started toward Emily. I moved fast, weaving between startled guests and ducking behind one of the towering floral arrangements near the head table. My heart was pounding, but not from fear, from the rush of finally taking control of this mess. Emily noticed me before anyone else did. Her eyes widened for just a fraction of a second, but she didn't cry out. Instead, she glanced toward Linda, who was still across the room, flapping her hands at the staff to get the champagne spill cleaned up, and then back at me. That tiny flicker of recognition in her face wasn't anger. It was relief. I crouched low beside her chair, half hidden by the tablecloth. "Emily," I whispered, "what's going on? Why did you tell me to leave?" Her hands froze on the edge of the table. "Dad, you can't be here. I'm not leaving until I know the truth." My voice was low, but it carried the steel I used when she was a kid and tried to dodge a serious talk. She swallowed hard, glancing again at the far side of the room. "It's not what you think. Mom." She stopped abruptly, her face tightening. "Mom made me." The words hit like a gut punch, even though I'd suspected it. "She told me if you showed up, she'd make sure the whole wedding was ruined. She'd embarrass you, embarrass Daniel, embarrass me." My fists clenched under the table. "So, she forced you to cut me out? Why? What did she tell you?" Emily's eyes darted over my shoulder, and I knew before I turned that black suit guy was heading back toward us. Her lips moved fast, barely a whisper. "She said you stole from me. From my college fund. She said you only came today to cause trouble." My breath caught. It was a lie. A complete fabrication. And it explained everything. Black suit guy was closing in. Time was running out. I could feel the heat rising in my chest, but I forced myself to stay calm. Getting angry now would just make Linda's story look true. I leaned closer to Emily, keeping my voice steady. "You know that's not true. I gave you money for college. You remember the cashier's check, right? The one I handed you at the diner before you left for school?" Her eyes softened for a moment, a flicker of doubt cracking through the wall Linda had built. But then she bit her lip, like she was afraid to admit it out loud. She said, "You were just covering your tracks. That you'd already taken the rest years ago." I wanted to curse Linda's name so loud the whole hotel heard it, but instead, I slipped my phone from my pocket. "Emily, I still have the bank records. Every payment I ever made into that account. I can prove she's lying." Black suit guy was just a few steps away now, scanning me like he was about to decide whether to drag me out by the arm or the neck. I pressed my phone into Emily's hand under the table. "Don't look at it now. Wait until you're alone. You'll see the truth." Her fingers closed around it slowly, like she was holding a live wire. "Dad," she started, but it was too late. A shadow fell over us, and a deep voice said, "Sir, you need to come with me." I stood up slowly, my chair scraping against the floor. "Sure," I said, loud enough for the nearest guest to hear. I was just saying hello to my daughter. A few people turned to look, their curiosity piqued, which was exactly what I wanted. If Linda was going to try to spin this, she'd have to do it with more witnesses watching than she'd planned. As Black Suit Guy escorted me toward the back, I caught one last glimpse of Emily, staring down at the phone in her lap. The seed of doubt had been planted. Now, I just had to make sure it grew before Linda yanked it out. Black Suit Guy, I was starting to think of him as Linda's guard dog, walked me toward a side hallway, his hand hovering just close enough to my elbow to remind me he could grab me if he wanted. "You've been told you're not welcome," he said in that low, controlled voice people use when they think they're in charge. "Yeah," I replied, keeping my own tone casual. "But see, there's a difference between being unwelcome and being lied about. And buddy, I just been lied about in a big way." He didn't answer, just kept walking me toward an exit near the catering storage. But the whole time, I could see guests turning in their chairs to watch. Curious eyes followed us, people who would remember this moment later and start asking their own questions. When we reached the side door, he stepped in front of me, blocking the exit. "If you try to come back in, I'll have security remove you from the property." I smiled, not because I was happy, but because I just spotted the opening I needed. Through the narrow crack in the kitchen door behind him, I saw Emily's maid of honor moving toward the head table, and I knew she and Emily had been close since they were 12. If anyone could get Emily alone for even 5 minutes, it was her. So instead of arguing, I stepped outside into the warm evening air. I let the door shut behind me, then counted to 30. There was another entrance on the far side of the building, one I'd noticed earlier when I first arrived. If I slipped in there, I could get back near the ballroom without black suit guy knowing. And if my hunch was right, Emily would be looking at those bank records by the time I got there. I kept to the shadows along the side of the hotel, moving quickly but not enough to draw attention from the valet staff near the front. The second entrance was tucked by a row of potted palms and marked service access, staff only. I pulled the handle. Locked. For a moment, I cursed under my breath, but then I remembered the old trick from my contracting days. The push bar on the inside could be triggered if you wedged something thin into the seam. I took out the metal clip from my tie. I ditched it earlier when I started sweating and slid it into the gap. Click. The door eased open just enough for me to slip inside. This hallway was darker and quieter than the others, lined with folded banquet chairs and stacked crates of glasses. I moved slowly, listening for voices. As I neared the end of the hall, I heard them, two women talking in hushed tones just around the corner. I peeked, and there she was. Emily, standing with her maid of honor, clutching my phone like it was burning her hand. Her face was pale, eyes wide as she scrolled. "He has every deposit, every date." She lied. Carly, she lied about everything. Carly glanced toward the ballroom, biting her lip. "If you say something now, your mom's going to go nuclear." In front of everyone, Emily's voice trembled. "I can't let her keep doing this. Not today. Not ever again." I took a step forward, and the floor creaked. Emily's head snapped up, and when she saw me, she didn't look angry. She looked relieved, but relief was short-lived. Over her shoulder, I saw Linda heading toward them, her smile already sharpened into something predatory. If I didn't move now, Linda would tear this moment apart before Emily could even speak. I stepped out from behind the corner before Linda could reach them, making sure my voice carried just enough for nearby guests to hear. "Emily," I said, keeping my tone calm but deliberate, "did you get a chance to look at those records?" Her eyes flickered to Linda, then back to me. "Yes, I did." Linda's heels clicked faster as she closed the gap, her voice dripping with false sweetness. "Michael, I told you this wasn't the time or place. Actually, I cut in. I think this is exactly the time and place. Because for years, you've been telling our daughter I stole from her, when in reality, I was the one putting money in her account. Every payment, every receipt, it's all right there on that phone." A ripple of murmurs moved through the guests nearby. People were listening now. Linda's smile didn't break, but her eyes turned to ice. "He's twisting things, Emily. You can't believe." Emily's voice suddenly cut through hers. "Stop, Mom." It wasn't loud, but the sharpness made Linda's mouth freeze mid-sentence. Emily took a step forward, holding up my phone like evidence in a courtroom. "I saw everything. Dad's telling the truth." For the first time all evening, Linda actually looked rattled. Her gaze darted to the man in the black suit, but he didn't move. Maybe even he knew this was turning into something too public to touch. "You've been lying to me for years," Emily said, her voice shaking, not from fear, but from anger. "And you tried to ruin my wedding to keep your lie going." Gasps broke out around us. The energy in the room shifted like a wave. Linda tried to recover, pasting on another smile. Sweetheart, you're just stressed. This isn't no, Emily said firmly. This ends today. And then she turned to me. Dad, will you dance with me? For the father-daughter song. The crowd erupted in applause. Linda's face drained of color. I felt something catch in my throat as the applause swelled. For a moment, I couldn't move, not because I didn't want to, but because I was afraid I'd wake up and find out this was just a dream I'd had after being thrown out of the wedding. But Emily was standing there, holding out her hand, not as a bride giving a polite gesture, but as my daughter, the same little girl who used to dance on my shoes in the living room to old Motown records. I stepped forward and took her hand. I'd be honored. The DJ, sensing the shift in the room, switched the playlist without a word. The opening notes of a soft, familiar song filled the air. Emily led me to the dance floor, and as the guests gathered around, I could feel hundreds of eyes on us, some smiling, some wide with disbelief. Linda stayed rooted in her spot, her arms stiff at her sides. For the first time, she wasn't the one controlling the moment. As we began to dance, Emily whispered, I'm sorry, Dad. I should have trusted you sooner. I shook my head. You don't need to apologize. You just needed the truth. She gave a watery smile. Thank you for not leaving, even when I told you to. I'd never leave you, I said, my voice low. Not on your wedding day. Not ever. The song swelled, and as I turned her under my arm, I caught sight of guests watching with misty eyes, even Daniel, who gave me a quiet nod of approval. When the music faded, the room erupted in cheers. Emily hugged me tight, and for the first time that day, I felt the knot in my chest finally loosen. Linda turned and walked briskly toward the exit, her heels striking the floor like gunshots. But it didn't matter anymore. She'd lost the narrative, and my daughter had taken it back. This was Emily's day, and in the end, we made sure it stayed that way. After the dance, I stepped off the floor, letting Emily return to Daniel. The applause was still fading when I found myself by the edge of the room, watching her laugh, really laugh, for the first time all day. I let the moment sink in. 3 hours earlier, I'd been standing outside those doors, humiliated and confused, wondering if I'd already lost my daughter for good. Now I was standing inside, my place in her life not just restored, but solidified in a way Linda could never undo. It hit me how close I'd come to walking away when she first told me to leave. How easy it would have been to believe the worst and disappear, letting Linda's version of the truth win. But the thing about being a parent, a real parent, is that you don't get to quit when it's hard. You push, you dig, you fight for your kid, even if they're an adult who thinks they don't need saving. I'd spent years thinking my role as a father would fade once Emily grew up. Today proved I was wrong. The role just changes. You stop tucking them in at night, but you never stop guarding their corner. And the truth? This day wasn't just about Emily getting married. It was about her learning that I was still in her corner, no matter who tried to push me out. The string lights above the dance floor glowed warm, casting soft halos over the guests. I could feel the weight of the earlier tension finally lifting from the room. The rest of the night could actually be about celebration now. But I also knew there was one more thing I needed to do before I could really relax. I spotted Daniel standing near the dessert table, talking with one of his groomsmen. When he noticed me, he excused himself and walked over. There was a little hesitation in his step, like he wasn't sure what I'd say after everything that had happened. I'm glad you stayed, he said quietly. Emily needed you here. I nodded. I needed to be here. For her. And for both of you. He glanced over at Emily, now chatting with friends, the stress gone from her face. I knew something wasn't right when she told me you weren't invited, but I didn't know how to push back without starting a war with your ex. I know, I said. Linda's always been good at making people feel trapped. Daniel's jaw tightened. Well, she doesn't get to run our lives anymore. We shook hands, not just a polite handshake, but one with real weight behind it. Then he did something I didn't expect. He pulled me into a quick, firm hug. When I returned to my seat, Emily found me again. She sat down, her wedding dress pooling around her like a cloud. Dad, I don't think I've ever said this enough, but thank you. Not just for today, for always being there. Even when I didn't know I needed you. I smiled. You don't have to thank me for being your dad. It's the best job I've ever had. Her eyes shimmered. I want you in our lives. Not as a guest, not as an afterthought. Always. That was it. The real victory. Not the dance, not proving Linda wrong, but hearing my daughter say those words and knowing she meant them. As the night went on, I let myself enjoy it. The toasts, the music, the laughter. Linda was gone, her shadow no longer hanging over us. When I finally hugged Emily goodbye at the end of the night, she whispered, "I'll call you tomorrow." First thing, and I knew she would. If this story touched you, please subscribe, leave a like, and share your thoughts in the comments. I'd love to hear how you feel about it.